As we pass the halfway point of the East Blue Saga, we've heard rumblings of a certain place. The Pirate Graveyard, a place of horror where those who go there return as broken men. The Grand Line. And fittingly, as we come across a floating restaurant, Oda decides it's time to give us a taste of it. What does it take to succeed? Who dwells there? And as always, what is Oda telling us? What is the point of East Blue? So let me get it out first. We aren't talking about Sanji this part. He's going to get a part all to himself, just like Usopp. We're not going to talk too much about Luffy either. The focus here is how Oda starts preparing us for the Grand Line. And to do that, we have to talk about someone that generally people aren't a big fan of. We have to talk about Don Krieg. We don't see Krieg for a while. We see his combat commander first, who we'll talk about next part along with Sanji. We see rumors about him and his 5,000-man pirate armada, and we see how terrified everyone is of the thought that he is coming. And then we see his ship. The translation sound effects obscure the Merry a fair bit, but look at the absolute enormity of it compared to the Merry. Krieg's ship looks like it could hold the Merry in its masthead's mouth. And this ship is a wreck. We've heard from Gin that the Grand Line is horrifying, and we quickly learn that, yes, the reason that this gargantuan vessel is in its current state is due to its experience on the Grand Line. Sure, we've heard the rumors and seen a vague image from Gaimon describing men that return from the Grand Line, but now we're seeing it firsthand. Then we finally see the Don himself, weak from hunger, crying, bargaining, promising that he'll leave once fed, desperately thanking Sanji for giving him food. And in what I think is one of the fastest turnarounds I've ever seen, we get a page of warning about Krieg's duplicitous nature, and then immediately on the next page he gives Sanji the clothesline. Like, Oda, please, it's been like 5 panels, even Kuro got a couple of chapters before his heel turn. Anyway, we get the reveal of how he fights, his speech on how strong he is, and that sums up Krieg's character. Now let's talk about why Krieg's character is the way he is, and why I think that's why he isn't well liked. It's because Don Krieg is a character that exists to show us readers what fails on the Grand Line. He is a narrative tool, the remaining checklist items of traits that Oda wanted to show off in the East Blue villains with the flavor of Grand Line failure. Unlike Alvida, he is quite strong and manages to take a few hits from Luffy. Unlike Aksand, he has a loyal crew, and he doesn't particularly mistreat them. Yes, he obviously tells Gin to die, but Gin is blatantly going against his orders. Unlike Buggy, he isn't blinded by greed. Yes, his whole conceit is trying to take over the Baratie, but it's more of a necessity to him. And unlike Kuro, he doesn't abandon the pirate life. On the contrary, he's ready and willing to return to the Grand Line and explicitly states his goal to be Pirate King, or at least to capture the One Piece. Don Krieg has a large armada, lots of crew, lots of tools, a giant ship. Gin, his combat commander, is almost fanatically loyal to him. But where Krieg fails is his perception of strength and what it takes to succeed on the Grand Line. What Krieg thinks he needs is things. Things will make him Pirate King. Any setback he comes across will be solved by things. When he comes across Mihawk, he doesn't even register it as a personal failure. He's just like, no way he's actually that strong, it's probably a devil fruit. A thing. When he thinks he was unprepared for the Grand Line and what was there, his solution is to take Zeff's logbook. Another thing. His strength isn't in any technique that he's learned, any skill that he has, but by his accumulated things. His Woot's steel armor, his diamond fists, his weapons. Oh, Nika, his weapons. Whenever a weapon he has is overcome, his solution is to pull out another, greater weapon, because he can't conceive that he has made a mistake, that he was too weak. No, that thing wasn't good enough, and another thing will be the solution. So of course he is defeated by single individuals. First Mihawk, who, while certainly has some great fashion and a very large sword, doesn't have a crew, doesn't have a large ship, doesn't have a multitude of weapons. All Mihawk is a representation of strength in its purest form. And then Krieg is defeated by Luffy, whose crew aren't around him, who is currently in debt, whose ship has been stolen, and who only uses his body to fight. We're skipping right to the question I normally ask at the end. Why does Krieg fall short when he comes up against Luffy? And ultimately, why does Krieg fail when he comes up against the Grand Line? Why does Luffy, in Zeff's eyes, stand a chance? Because Luffy believes in himself, improves himself, pushes himself, overcomes his past self. When Luffy comes up against an obstacle, he doesn't think that he needs a thing to overcome it. He'll take it head on, get stronger while doing it, and break through the obstacle or die trying. As Zeff says, Luffy has got grit. Oda pummels this message into us in the fight between Krieg and Luffy. The battle is, Krieg uses a thing, Luffy overcomes that thing, so Krieg uses another thing and Luffy overcomes that thing, and repeat until Krieg has been defeated. It's for this reason that Luffy punches through his spike armor, breaks his spear, and smashes through Krieg's woot steel armor. Luffy overcomes these things that Krieg uses. Ultimately, this, in my opinion, is why people don't like Krieg, because underneath all his armor, behind his crew and his weapons, he is empty. He's that annoying kid on the playground showing off their cool new toy, thinking that this is what will get people to be impressed by him, not realizing that no matter how many things that he has, the person that has it is still lacking. That's not what's going to get him to succeed on the Grand Line. And those kind of people are just plain annoying. So who does succeed on the Grand Line? Who has the fame, the prowess, the style? Of course, it's time to talk about the world's greatest swordsman, Mihawk. Mihawk is the anti-Krieg. He has no men, his ship is minuscule, he wears no armor, and unlike Krieg's many hidden weapons, Mihawk has just the one on full display for everyone to see. Mihawk, figuratively and literally, dismantles Krieg's ideal of what it takes to sail the Grand Line and represents one end of the spectrum of Grand Line success, that of pure and overwhelming strength and skill. He's so strong that he is bored and he's chasing Krieg from the Grand Line simply for his own entertainment. It makes me wonder if Mihawk saw Krieg's 5,000 crew armada and thought humiliating someone like that would be fun. And of course, Mihawk's appearance serves the additional purpose of informing us readers that this type of person is who Luffy and the crew will come across when they enter the Grand Line. People with the strength to tear a ship asunder, to reduce a crew of 5,000 to 100. And that this person, an inhabitant of the Grand Line, is someone who Zoro must overcome to achieve his dream. We're taking a break from talking about the Grand Line because it's time to talk about the character-defining moment for Zoro in the East Blue, his duel with Mihawk, the greatest swordsman in the world. Zoro is by no means weak. Every single fight he's had this entire series, he's been handicapped in some way. He's starving, he's taken by surprise, he's been injured, he's had his sword stolen, he's never been granted an honorable one-on-one swords fight. His duel against Mihawk is his first, and Zoro's sword skills are humiliated, though his spirit is not. Mihawk is unimpressed by Krieg and his blathering, he's bored by the world, but he sees in Zoro that he has the mindset to go the distance, to be able to one day potentially give Mihawk the challenge he wants. So let's pinpoint some key moments from their duel. First is Mihawk's reaction to Zoro's sword skills, and Mihawk initially only has one comment about them. Such heavy-handed swordplay. And look at that expression when he does it. We see a lot of unimpressed Mihawk, but this is even a level below that. He almost looks disgusted. But, there is one time I do think Mihawk is impressed, or at least surprised, when Zoro cracks open his secret move, 3,000 Worlds. Sure, Mihawk doesn't get injured or anything like that, but we do get one small panel of Mihawk reacting with something more than just disdain. Heck, he even has a sweat drop. I think a lot of people focus on Zoro getting absolutely bodied in this fight, but it's important to recognize that at least one attack of Zoro's did make an impression. Though the far more gripping part of this fight is Zoro changing Mihawk's opinion of him, and it goes in 3 stages. First stage is of course the previously mentioned Zoro shows off his swordsmanship phase, where Mihawk is bored, disgusted, etc, etc. We can assume that many people fancying themselves as swordsmen have challenged Mihawk, and their skills have elicited a similar reaction. Then, when Mihawk stabs Zoro, we enter phase 2, I prefer death to defeat. Now Zoro's strength of spirit has impressed Mihawk and he asked for Zoro's name. Zoro's challenge is no longer just some upstart wanting to test his strength. Mihawk finally recognizes Zoro as a swordsman, not due to his skills, but his attitude, and thus honors the duel properly by using his actual sword. Though Mihawk hasn't decided not to kill Zoro just yet. It may have been a while since Mihawk has come across someone so brave, but only a while. If anything, Zoro has earned the right to be killed by Mihawk's weapon, and we can see that Mihawk intends to follow through with this as he turns to land the final blow on Zoro. But that's when we enter Phase 3. Wounds on the back are a swordsman's shame, and we see Mihawk smile for the first time. Magnificent. And I think this is the key line here. Zoro isn't aiming to be the greatest fighter in the world, and Mihawk isn't known as the strongest warrior on the sea. It's all about being a swordsman, and it's Zoro's commitment, even in the face of death, to being a swordsman, dying as a swordsman. That is what impresses upon Mihawk that Zoro has what it takes. Sure, it's one thing to call yourself a swordsman, but only those who have the capability to pursue swordsmanship with their whole heart and mind can ever hope to reach the peak that Mihawk has. Zoro, of course, has his own evolution from this fight. He quickly learns that he, as Mihawk puts it, is just a frog in a small pond, and as Mihawk tells us, the weakest pond, the East Blue being apparently the weakest of the 4 seas. He starts having his life flash before his eyes, reminiscent of when he thought he was about to die at the hands of Haxhand Morgan, though this time the final scene we see is that of Luffy. The man who saved his life, the one who not just accepted his dream but encouraged it, made Zoro double down on it. The king of the pirates needs the world's greatest swordsman on his crew. His captain, the one Zoro gave his word to serve under, needs him to be the greatest. And in that moment, Zoro gets stabbed, and he and Mihawk discuss what defeat is. It's to retreat, for your vows, ambitions, and everything you care about to be shattered. It's something that causes you to lose your dreams forever. Remember this description of defeat? I'll be bringing it up again shortly. With Zoro's final attack, he thinks, greatest in the world, or death. In his mind, if this attack does not work, he has failed and his dreams are over. So he pulls out a move we've never seen before, 3,000 worlds, and he and Mihawk cross swords. In the final clash, the one sword that doesn't break is Kuina's. I mentioned in a previous part that Zoro only takes up the 3-sword style upon Kuina's death, and her sword is the one that he holds in his mouth, the sword that he vowed upon. I saw this as Kuina's dream being added to Zoro's, not overriding or replacing it. So call it a stretch or reading too much into it, but this moment when Zoro has admitted defeat and is prepared to die, Kuina's will has not been broken. And on this same sword that he swore with tears in his eyes to become the greatest in the world, Zoro makes an additional vow to Luffy. And note, this is to Luffy, separate to his promise to Kuina. Once again, he sheds tears, he shows vulnerability, and he makes a vow. I will never lose again. Let's unpack that promise, because I've seen the memes, I'll never lose again, except against Mr. 3, Kuma, Kaido, etc, etc. What does it mean for Zoro to lose? First, you could read it as to another swordsman. That would be the most generous reading for Zoro, though I don't think I'd agree. Personally, I think lose is the wrong word. I think the better word is defeated. Zoro will never be defeated again. It links better to his and Mihawk's brief discussion about what defeat is, to retreat, to have his vows and ambitions shattered, to give up on his dream. I don't think Zoro is stupid. He's goofy, he can be an idiot, but is not stupid. Zoro knows his limits, or rather he's been freshly introduced to them. He doesn't think if Mihawk forced him into a round 2 after his wounds recover that he's not going to get absolutely clapped. He now knows that there is a long way to go, and that there are going to be many others further along that journey than he. So when Zoro says he won't lose again, I think it means that he will never back down. He will never say that it is over. Why do I think this? Well, we're going to skip ahead to the next arc. The idea of not losing is fresh in Zoro's memory, and when he fights Hachi, he goes the distance and wins. But against Arlong, Zoro only thinks he can last a maximum of 30 seconds. So does that mean Zoro has admitted defeat? No, I don't think so. I'm really bungling it, I get that, but there's something deeper to Zoro admitting to a loss than him simply getting beaten. It's a question of will, of spirit, those sort of shonen anime tropes. It's about overcoming, getting back up and trying again. That's the difference. With Mihawk, Zoro admits defeat. He accepts death. He understands that it's well and truly over. He is ready to die. It's the end of his dream. He has failed. And so when he is overcome with emotion, the bitterness of being truly defeated, that he was about to break his promise to Kuina, the shame that he was spared by his opponent, and the relief that he somehow manages to get a second chance, he breaks down, becomes vulnerable for the first time since Kuina's death, and swears to his captain that he will never lose like that ever again. He won't give up ever again. He won't accept defeat ever again. He will fight. He will continue on. Even if he is battered and broken, even if he gets knocked down, he will get back up and try again. He will never again accept death. But that answer may not satisfy some people, and fair enough. That's just my interpretation, so if you've got a different one, let me know in the comments down below. At the conclusion of the duel, it's important to recognize that Mihawk also recognizes Luffy, first for not interfering in the duel, and then he accepts Luffy's goal to become Pirate King, and also importantly, acknowledges that it's harder than becoming the greatest swordsman. When he leaves, he doesn't say, "I hope to encounter you again someday, Zoro." It's specifically, "you too," referring to Luffy as well. There's something about Luffy that Mihawk also acknowledges as special. There's more to say about the duel, mainly about Sanji and a bit about Luffy, but I'll keep that for the next part since Zoro's duel is actually very important to Sanji's character. Whew. Only 3 pages on Zoro's duel, that's about as short as I can make it. What were we talking about? The Grand Line? Where were we? We've covered what Krieg tells us about the Grand Line, what Mihawk tells us, so now it's time to talk about Zeff. Zeff is the story of someone who has experienced the Grand Line and doesn't seem to be scarred from the ordeal. He gained enough notoriety that Krieg knows of him, but he didn't remain there as Mihawk does. His logbook, which Krieg thinks will reveal some sort of secret about how to survive on the Grand Line, holds value to Zeff as a testament to the life that he lived as a captain, as a pirate, and of his crewmates. We don't know why Zeff left the Grand Line. He was only there for a year, but Zeff plays the role of an older, more experienced pirate who knows what it takes to stand a chance, and he provides Sanji and us, the readers, a commentary on Luffy and Krieg's fight. Most of the commentary he provides is to affirm that Luffy's grit, his determination, his willpower, is what matters more than Krieg's things, and we can extrapolate that to mean that this also applies to pirates of the Grand Line. The final thing that Zeff tells us about the Grand Line, though, is that for some, it is a place of dreams. Remember, up to this point, from Kobe, from Gaimon, from Krieg's own crew, the Grand Line is a hellish place. But Zeff, who has been there but didn't find what he was looking for, he still thinks this is where Sanji's dream is. It's a tough place for sure, and pirates may come back broken, but for some, the Grand Line is where they can follow their dreams. It's where Zoro will once again face Mihawk, where Luffy will become Pirate King and take another step towards his unknown dream, and it's where Zeff thinks that Sanji will find his dream. And that sums up what this arc tells us about the Grand Line, a little sampling of what will come in another 30-odd chapters. So let me rapid fire some other stuff, since I'm sure the next part covering Sanji won't have time for it. First, let's get Johnny and Yosaku out of the way. They add the smallest bit of additional detail to Zoro's backstory, but let's get it straight that they exist for a couple of very specific reasons. They show us how important nutrition is on the Grand Line, so Oda doesn't have any of the Straw Hats suffer from scurvy. They lead the crew to the Baratie. They, or at least Yosaku, guide Luffy and Sanji to Arlong Park, and then they serve a couple of roles during Arlong Park. I guess they also show that Luffy doesn't interfere or let others interfere with Zoro's duel with Mihawk, and it's their wanted posters that trigger Nami to leave the crew. I mean, aside from those things and the fact that they call everyone brother, do you remember anything else about them? They've got a very specific narrative purpose, and they fulfill it. Speaking of which, Nami. She makes a swift but dramatic exit this arc, taking the ship, seemingly betraying the Straw Hats. During her betrayal, we see a familiar expression. It's this smile again, that facade that she puts up to deceive others, though this time she's putting up the facade after the betrayal has occurred. She should have no reason to hide her true feelings, but we can also tell it's not easy to keep it up this time. Look how tired she looks in this panel, how exhausted she is of betrayal, and especially in this case. At the end of this same chapter we see her true feelings, and we've never seen her cry like this. She really, truly enjoyed her time with Luffy and the crew, and she wishes that she was free to be with them. Good thing a certain liberator will be coming her way very soon. Usopp has a couple of moments as well. He's the one that properly paints out the crew's emblem. Luffy did design it as best he could though. We can see that Usopp is also multi-talented, though in a more creative sense than Nami is. Let's see how he uses this creativity in the future. We see that Usopp's sniping skills with his slingshot apparently also carry over to cannons, which clues us in that Usopp may be talented with other ranged weapons. A small but important detail is that after the crew discover that Nami has made off with their ship, Usopp calls it Kaya's ship. It shows that Usopp has a more sentimental attachment to the Going Merry since it was provided to them by Kaya. Finally, Usopp does a good job staying surprisingly calm under pressure as he treats Zoro's wounds, even as Johnny and Yosaku are losing their minds. Then he takes point as the crew splits to chase after Nami. I said it last time and I'll say it again, Usopp can be very dependable. I guess I'll throw a little bit of Luffy in this part since it won't flow with the rest of the Luffy stuff for next part. It's the establishment of a pattern. Luffy really wants a musician. Pirates have to sing. This isn't the first time and it won't be the last. Luffy even thinks it's important enough that it's a position needing to be filled before they enter the Grandline. We know Luffy loves his food, but in his requirements of what is needed on a pirate crew, musician comes before a cook. Anything else? Wait, what's that? Find PANDAMAN? Of course, how could I miss one of One Piece's most prolific characters, PANDAMAN? Those who somehow don't know, this is a character that is like the Where's Wally, or Waldo if you're American, of One Piece, popping up where you'd least expect him, hidden in various panels throughout the manga. He doesn't have a story purpose, but it's in this arc that he makes his first appearance. I knew I'd have to mention him, or someone else would. Alright, now I'm done. Next part we cover Sanji's introduction, everything that it tells us about his character, his flaws, what drives him, and how Luffy factors into all of that, as well as how Gin factors in. Did I miss anything about Zoro and Mihawk's duel? Were there any other tidbits about the Grandline that I missed? Leave a comment, I love reading them, because, as always, it's not I attempt new things, it's we attempt new things. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a fruitful day.